During this time, a new program started on Luxembourg called This I Believe. It was produced by Monty Bailey Watson. And I must say that he is a very fine producer, and I enjoyed every one of these shows. There was something very deep about them. It told the story of people that have suffered and yet have found a way and found a place in the world. In this particular story, it described how a spastic child, through the aid of her mother and family, find a place in the world. Where the woman's speech should have been in the show, the child ran across the stage and therefore spoiled it. But we recorded this afterwards, and the woman became very emotional, and you can hear this in her voice. Here then is the extract out of This I Believe.
When we were young, we used to read the stories where the ending said, and they lived happily ever after. What I believe in, what Mr. Elsie believes in, and what we've tried to teach the whole family to believe in is living happily ever after is not just in fairy tales. It can happen to all of us. It has happened to us. This we believe.
How the public loved this show, and soon letters rolled in, and Ross Radio had once more launched a winner on Luxembourg. Well, the show is starting again in the near future, a couple of weeks' time, and I'm recording the first again. I don't know how long it'll go on for, but I hope for some time. I'd like to play you now part of one of This I Believe programs. I think perhaps the most sincere of all, and one that touched my heart. It was about a spastic child. This is how the show went out over the air.
Of all earthly creatures, only man was given faith, was given the power to reason, to hammer out upon the anvil of experience the truths he needs to guide him. Of all earthly creatures, only man was given the right to stand erect and say or shout, "This I believe."
Once again, CWS, the Cooperative Wholesale Society, brings you This I Believe, another in the series of true stories about today's people and their search for a faith to live with. Tonight's story, one we feel to be truly remarkable, the miracle of Angela. To introduce the story to you, once again your host, Basil Bartlett.
Thank you, and good evening. Death is thought of as inevitable, unchallengeable. Yet you are about to hear the story of a family who challenged death daily in a fight to save not their own lives, but the life of one who, however dear to them, was far too young, too weak at first to fight for herself.
Basil Bartlett brings you the story of Angela in just a moment. But first, a word about something different. In these days of...
Well, of course, along comes the commercial, which in a way spoils the show, so we'll skip the commercial and go on to the next part of the play.
And now, Basil Bartlett.
The story of the miracle of Angela begins at the beginning of all things, at that split second of indecision attending the arrival of all new things into this very old world, when life and death stand one on either side of the newborn child and wait. And suddenly, the victory goes to life, momentarily.
Good morning, Mrs. McKnight. How are we feeling this morning? We feel wonderful and wonderfully flat in the tummy.
Good. It's a beautiful day. Snowing rather heavily.
Is it? How nice. Children ought to be born during the winter. Imagine having one's first spring to look forward to.
Oh, I shouldn't think she'd care what season it is. The age she'll be next spring. Have you thought what you call your baby?
Of course. Angela Wendy Margaret McKnight. When may I see her?
Soon. Oh, by the way, Matron thought you ought to know. Baby has a small stain on her face.
But she's all right, isn't she?
Oh, of course. Now, you drink your tea while I see about having you presented to your new daughter.
Ivy McKnight supped her cup of tea, waited, and thought. About Angela Wendy Margaret. About her older daughter, Terry, now 4. And how Terry had been born with a small stain on her shoulder that was removed when the child was 3 months. So even if there were a stain on Angela's face, there surely couldn't be anything wrong. Only, why wasn't her baby brought to her? At that moment, Ivy McKnight could not know that outside the room where she was, her husband Cyril and her mother were standing in sick indecision, trying to find courage to mask the expression on their faces, the expression grief had stamped on both of them at their first sight of little Angela. That mark. It's all over one side of the baby's face. Ivy, you must listen. I know how you feel. I felt the same way when I first saw the baby.
But they told me a stain. I thought something like that mark on Terry's shoulder. But this, right across the top of her head, Cyril.
Ivy, please try not to excite yourself.
It's even down behind her little ear. Surely no ordinary birthmark could be so serious.
I don't know, dear. Nobody knows yet. I do know our baby is perfect organically, thank God, because we've always had a thing about physical perfection, you and I, but beyond that, I just don't know.
But we must find out just as soon as we can, Cyril. There'll be doctors who'll know. We'll see them.
Of course, you know that. But the first thing is to get you and Angela back home again. We've examined your baby carefully, Mrs. McKnight. We can only tell you she'll have to be a bit older before we can do anything about the stain on her face.
Older, Doctor? How much older?
I should say at least 2 years.
2 years? And you call that a bit? 2 years.
Nightmares begin quietly. They begin without warning as well. And they begin with no hint of when they will end, if ever. But they do begin quietly. One day, when Angela was about 3 months old, while Ivy McKnight was feeding her, the baby fell into spasms, became violently ill. This coupled with severe twitchings of the right arm and leg. Ivy rushed the child to their doctor, a woman they had been going to for some time.
Mrs. McKnight, I don't want you to panic, but Angela has cerebral pressure.
Cerebral? You mean something's pressing on her brain? But what?
If I told you, it would only be a guess, and you want a proper diagnosis. I'm going to telephone a London specialist, and I want you to get up there right away.
Yes, of course, I'll go at once.
One thing more, my dear.
Yes?
Be sure to tell them at hospital that your baby has not been christened.
Not been christened? Are you trying to tell me that...
Oh, they have to know these things, just in case.
Well, by just that little piece, I'm sure you can judge what type of show this is and what type of performance was given on it. A very high standard indeed. Most of the actors and actresses were, of course, the BBC, and amongst the artists in that were Lewis Stringer and Beryl Crystal. And during the series, I met lots and lots more of BBC actresses and actors. Well, I think perhaps the most dramatic thing about this whole play, this actual one, was when the little girl herself, the spastic child, spoke at the end of the program. This was very dramatic. I shall never forget. But first her sister spoke, and here is Basil Bartlett introducing her.
Now, before we say good night to you, we'd like to have you meet, personally, a very remarkable family. First of all, a very pretty young lady of nearly 15, Miss Terry McKnight.
Hearing our story told right in front of us tonight has been a very strange experience. I wonder if any of you listening to it had brothers or sisters or children like my sister Angela. If you have, I hope you know we wanted a story told for you especially, because we wanted you to know how it was with us, because we wanted to say to you that love and believing can sometimes succeed where everything else has failed.
Now, Terry is an angel's father, Cyril McKnight.
I haven't a lot to add to what Terry just said. We went through a lot. We still have a lot ahead of us. It gave her a chance to grow up. We don't regret any sacrifice we've made. We'd do it again if we had to. Please God, we do not.
Now, Mrs. McKnight.
When I was asked to come on this program, I was also asked if I would not say a few words at the close of it, words to sum up what it is that I do believe. Since so much of the lives of our family has been bound up in Angel, it is only natural that what I believe should have to do with her, and with other children like her. I would like to tell the mothers of other spastic children this: the most vital thing is that your child, when it grows up, must be able to stand on its own 2 feet. Besides the gift of life itself, independence, not having to rely on friends, relatives, or even parents. This is the greatest gift which their mothers can give the spastic children. This, I believe.
Thank you, Ivy McKnight. And now, if we may, we'd like to have you meet Angela. Terry, do you think you could persuade Angel to say a few words to us?
Yes, certainly. Angela? Yes? Will you say that little prayer that you learn at school? God bless Mummy and Daddy. Take care of them, because they take care of me. Give them all they need, because they give me my dinner, my clothes, my toy, and all I need. God bless everybody else too, and make them good and happy. Amen. Good night, everybody. God bless.
And now, here is Basil Bartlett to tell you about next week's story on This I Believe. Well, actually, Pat, there's one way to tell our listeners what next week's show is about. It's better than any words from me. Listen.
Well, there you are. That's This I Believe. And I'm sure that must have touched your heart the same as it did mine. Well, the bumping and banging of the little girl running about was cut out because we put in the other part of Mrs. McKnight's speech. And, of course, we left in the little girl's speech. Well, so much for This I Believe.